Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a FastAPI backend to this YouTube Comments Analyzer app. So this uses React and FastAPI, and the basic idea is you paste in a URL for a YouTube video, and then it will analyze the comments on that video and categorize each comment. And for this video, I'm going to focus on the FastAPI backend, but in the next video, I'm going to focus on the React frontend. And then in the following video after that, I'm going to focus on deploying both together so they can work. But for this video, we're focusing on the FastAPI part. So this is what it looks like when you get the results. And then here, there are just two endpoints in my FastAPI app that I defined, analyze and status, to make this all work. So if you're interested in learning how to do this in FastAPI, this is the video for you. It's pretty beginner friendly because I'm going to explain everything that I'm doing. So with that said, let's get into making this API. So let me begin by showing you what I have. I have a Docker Compose file that just turns on Redis. So we'll be using Redis for this example. So I've already started Docker in the background. So this Redis container is running for me. I have the front end code here. So I'll cover everything in the front end stuff in the next video, but just know it's running. So here is the app as it's running right now. And here in the terminal, we have it running. And then that's it. So what I want to do is I want to cd into this backend directory that I have. So backend, and then I'll set it up with UV. So I'll do UV init here. So now we see in our backend, we have a main.py. So that's where we're going to write most of the code for this video. So let's go there. And what we're going to do is just remove everything because we're not going to use that code. So the first thing I want to do is I want to install FastAPI. So I want to do UV add and then FastAPI with brackets and then standard. So standard's going to install some extra dependencies that makes it a little easier to work with. So now that it's installed, I can go ahead and create the basics of a FastAPI app. So now in the code, I can import FastAPI. So I can do from FastAPI import FastAPI, and then I can instantiate the app object. So app equals FastAPI with parentheses, and now I can actually start it. So UV run FastAPI dev, and we see it started. So if we go here, we get not found for the index, which is fine. And then if we go to the docs, we see there's nothing here because I haven't defined anything yet. So before I get into writing the code that's going to do the actual work, I want to set things up a bit more. So one thing I want to do is I want to have some settings for the app because I'm going to use some environment variables and load them. So what I'll do is I will install a couple of things. So UV add, I want to install something called Pydantic settings. So Pydantic-settings. And then I also want to install python.env. So I'll add those two. And then I'll create another file called models. So this is where I'm going to keep all of my Pydantic models. And I'll say from Pydantic settings, import base settings. So I can create a model for my settings. So that looks like this. So class settings, base settings. And the reason why I'm creating this is so I'll have easy access to the different environment variables that I'm going to use. So for now, I'll start with one. And as I go through this video, I'll add more settings. But for now, I'll start with one, which is the front end URL. So the front end is going to exist at some URL, and I need to set up cores eventually to work with the front end. So I need the front end URL to set up cores. So in my settings, I'm adding a field for front end URL. And then another thing I want to do is I want to configure this model from my .env file, which I'll create in a second. So to do this, I'll do settings config dictionary, which is something that you can import from Pydantic settings. And in here, you just tell it where the env file is. So env file equals .env. So let me go ahead and create a .env file inside of the backend directory. And then I can do front end URL here. And my front end URL is just localhost 5173, exactly what I see here in the terminal when I'm running the front end. So I'll come back to the env when I have more things to add, but this is enough for the settings. So let's go to main and let's import them. So we'll say from models, import settings. And then I can instantiate those before the FastAPI object. So settings equals settings, just like that. And now I'll have access to the front-end URL anywhere where I need it by just doing settings.frontend URL, because it's going to take the front-end URL in here, it's going to add it to the object, create it from this model, and then I'll have it available in main.py. Another thing I want to do, since I use .env, is I want to use python.env. And the reason why I'm using this is just because of the Pydantic AI OpenAI integration, and I want to load in the API key environment variable for OpenAI. So it won't apply to the settings because settings is meant to be used somewhere in the code, whereas I just want to have the OpenAI key in the environment. So I'm going to use python.m to load that into the environment. So it's not really necessary if I were setting up a different AI provider, but because I'm using the default, I just think it's a little bit easier to put it in the environment instead of putting it in the code. So from .env import load env, and then I can just call that at the top. All right. So now another thing I need to take care of is the cores. So the backend is running on a separate domain or location from the front end. And because of that, I need to set up cores. Otherwise, the front end won't be able to connect to the backend. So to do that in FastAPI is pretty easy. First, what I want to do is I want to say from FastAPI.middleware.cores import cores middleware. And then on the app object, I can add that middleware. So add middleware is a method on the app object, if I can spell it correctly, add middleware. And what I want to add is the cores middleware that I just imported. And then I want to set up the values. So allow origins. This is going to be settings.frontend URL. So front-end URL. So that's why we set up the front-end URL. And then I want to just put everything to be basically the most permissive, because I'm creating this in a dev environment. So allow credentials is true, allow methods, star, so allow all methods, and allow headers will also be star, just to allow everything. And I can lock this down later. Okay, so now that we have that, let's just make sure the app starts up. So UV run FastAPI dev again. Make sure there are no issues. It says it can't import this load env, and that's because this should be load.env, not load env. So let's just change it. And now when we run, we see everything starts up. If we refresh here, there are no errors. So everything appears to be fine. So now we can get into actually creating the API. So there are two main endpoints that I want to create. One endpoint will take in the YouTube video URL, and then it will start the process. And another endpoint will have the status of that process. So basically the front end will poll for the status. And once the status changes to complete, it can show the results. But until the status is complete, it will just keep polling. So I want to create those two endpoints. So I'll start by creating the analyze one first. So before I even create the endpoint, I want to create a model that represents what the analyze endpoint will take in. So we'll just call this YouTube video, and it's going to inherit from base model, which I need to import. So at the top, I'll do from Pydantic import base model. And the only thing that I'll have in this YouTube video model is going to be a URL. So of course there could be more, but for this purpose, I only need the URL. And then I also want to set up a model for the response. So the YouTube video model is the input. So a URL is the input, and the output is going to be a task ID. So I'll set up a class called task. It's going to inherit from base model, and it's only going to have a task ID as the value. So those are the two models I'll work with on the analyze endpoint. And now let me go over to main.py and work on the analyze endpoint. So for this endpoint, we'll make it a post request. So app post and just /analyze. And then I need to create the function underneath. So analyze. And then we need the input. So we'll say YouTube video is going to be the YouTube video model. So let me go ahead and import that. So YouTube video, and then also the task. And did I put a capital T for YouTube? Yeah, capital T for YouTube. So capital T down here. And then this is going to return a task, right? So as you know, with FastAPI, the input can be a Pydantic model and the output can be a Pydantic model. And then FastAPI will know how to read that and convert it to a JSON in the case of a response. So now let's go through what needs to happen in Analyze. So the first thing that needs to happen is I need to get the URL. So I'm going to create a variable called parse URL because I'm getting a URL and I want to take off one part of it. So I'm going to parse it. And I can do this using URL parse. So I can import that from URL lib. So from URL lib.parse, I want to import URL parse. And since I'm here, I'll also import parse QS for a query string. So now let's go back down to this code and I'll just call the URL parse function and I'll pass in the URL for the YouTube video. So this will have the URL that's actually sent over to the API endpoint, and it will take that URL, pass it to URL parse, and then put it in this parse URL variable. And then I want to get the query string, so I can do parsed query string, or let's just say parse query. And I want to use that parse QS function that I imported with the parse URL dot query. So this parse URL is a parse URL object and it has a query on it. So I can do dot query here. And then finally, I want to get the video ID. So now that I've parsed the whole query, I want to grab the value of V. So when it comes to YouTube videos in the links, the video ID follows the letter V. So I want to do parse query dot get and then V. And then what I can do is I can say, if it doesn't exist, create a list with none. And then I want to get the first thing out of the list. So you can have multiple keys that are the same in a query string. So you would get a list of results. And I'm just saying that if it doesn't exist, I want that list to have none in it. And the reason why is so I can grab the first thing in that list. So if this were an empty list, I wouldn't be able to grab the first thing. But if it defaults to none, I can grab the first thing and it will be none if it doesn't find it. And of course, if it's there, it's going to give me the actual video ID. So that's the first part. I have the video ID. So I'm going to use that in a separate process, which I'll show you in a second. But before that process, what I want to do is I want to create a task ID. So this task ID is going to keep track of the progress of this single video that's getting processed. So to do that, I'm going to import the UUID4 function from UUID. So from UUID, import UUID4. And then down here, I'll create the task ID. So task ID equals stir because it gives you a UUID by default. So UUID4, and it will set that as the task ID. And then finally, I'm going to return the task. So task ID equals task ID. So you may notice that I haven't done anything with the actual processing yet, and that's because I will eventually. But to start, what I want to do is I just want to test this before I go too far. So I have this analyze endpoint set up. Let's go over to the docs and refresh, and we see analyze here. So I'm going to try this out. I'm going to pass in a YouTube link with a V on it, so a video ID, and hit execute. And we'll see if it returns a task ID. So we see that there is a little mistake here that the task ID is not an actual string, it's a function, or it's a string representation of a function. So that's not what we want. So the reason why it's happening is because I forgot to call the function. So if I go back over here and just run this again, now we see that I get a task ID. So presumably we're able to get the video ID. We can test that by printing here. So print video ID. And let me run this again. And if we look here, we see what appears to be a YouTube video ID in the terminal. So we can take that out and we know that this is working so far. So we're able to take in a YouTube video, a URL, and we're able to return a task. So now that I have this, I want to create the process for actually analyzing the comments. So what I'll do is I'll create a function here called analyze comments. and it's going to take in a few things. It's going to take in a task ID, which will be a string, and a video ID, which is also a string. And it's going to return none. So I'll just call pass here. I'll fill this in a second. But what I want to do is I want to have this run in the background. So FastAPI gives you a really convenient way of running background tasks. You don't have to use Celery because it's kind of embedded into the framework itself. Celery is still useful for things that are more complicated, but for simple things like this, it's going to be really useful to use the background tasks. So from FastAPI, I just need to import background tasks and then go down to the analyze. And then as a second argument to analyze, I'm going to add the background tasks dependency basically. So background tasks, and then it's going to be the class here. So background tasks, right? So what I can do here is I can say something like background tasks dot add task, and then I want to call the analyze comments function, and I want to pass in task ID and video ID. So that's how it works. The first argument to add task is the name of the function. And then the rest of the arguments are the arguments that you have on the function itself. And because it's easy to pass in a video ID that's not valid, I'll just put a check here if the video ID is valid, just so nothing messes up here. So this should call the analyze comments function. And now inside of here, I want to set things up to work with Redis. So let me go ahead and stop this, and then I'll install Redis. So UV add Redis. And then at the top, I'll import Redis. So import Redis here. And then I'll set up Redis. So underneath app equals FastAPI, I'll create this R object for Redis. So I'll do Redis dot capital R Redis dot from URL. So this is how you connect. And then the URL is going to be on settings, which I'll add in a second. And then I'll set decode responses equals to true, just so it's a little bit easier to work with. And then inside of settings, I'll add the Redis URL here. This is going to be a string. And then for the Redis URL in env, it's simply going to be Redis : / localhost and then 6379. And that just comes from Docker Compose here. So a really basic setup for Redis, basically all the defaults. Then I'll go to main.py again. And now with the R, I should be able to use it in analyze comments. So the first thing I want to do with Redis is I want to set up the task inside of Redis with like a pending or processing status. So I'll do r.set. So r.set will add something to Redis. And then the first argument will be the key. So the key in this case is going to be the task ID. And then the second argument is going to be some JSON for the data that I want to store. So I need to import JSON. So I'll just import that at the top. And then in here, I can do json.dump_s, and then I can pass in a dictionary. So for this, I'll do status, and then the status will be processing, and then data will be an empty list. So the idea here is when the status is processing, the data will be empty. And then when the status changes to complete, the data will have the actual analyze comments in them. So I'm starting the process by setting processing in no data because I haven't done anything yet. And then at the end of the process, I'll update it to reflect the actual data. So there are a couple of things that need to happen to get this to work. So first, I need to take the YouTube video and grab all the comments for it. And I'll use the YouTube API for that. And then second, I need to use PydanticAI and the OpenAI GPT LLM to analyze those comments according to a prompt. So I'll basically create two functions. One is I'll get the YouTube comments. And for this, I'll pass in the video ID, and then I'll also pass in my YouTube API key. And then once I get the comments, I want to analyze the comments. So maybe let's say analyze comments, and I'll call the function for this one, analyze comments AI. I know it's not the best name, but I just came up with that. And once I have those two, I can put them in an output. So the output is going to be a dictionary, and each value will be a list. So what I can do is I can say from collections, import default dictionary. And I want to use that because the output will be a default dictionary and the default values for each key will be a list. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is because in my prompt, I can easily change around the categories that I have. So for the output, the categories can be anything. And I want to make sure that there's going to be space to add things for each category. Whereas if I had a fixed number of categories, then I wouldn't have to do this. So I'm having dynamic categories, but that's not required. So let's assume that I have the analyzed comments. Then what I want to do is I want to loop over them. So I'll say for comment in analyzed comments. So analyzed comments. I'll update the output. So remember, output is going to have dynamic keys. So I'm going to look at the category. And this is going to come from the AI eventually. I'm just writing the code here to show you what's going to happen. And then everything is going to be a list because of the default dictionary. So for a particular category, I want to append a dictionary, and I'm going to append the ID of the comment. So comment ID, and then the text of the comment. So that would be comments that gets comment ID and that. And we'll see in a second. So this is going to be a dictionary with the original comments because I want to keep the original comments as well. But also the analyzed comments will have the AI result, which is going to be slightly different. The AI result won't have the original. It's just going to categorize everything and return the comment ID. So once I have this, then I can update the process. So R set, going to take in a task ID, and then JSON.dump_s, same idea as the first line. And the status is going to be completed here. So the process is finished here. And then data will be output, right? So this is the basic analyze comments function. And the idea here is this code here, like everything in the middle, is going to take some time. So even though I'm starting the function by setting processing and ending it by setting completed, the stuff that happens in between can take, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. It really depends on how many comments you have. And while this is running, the front end will be polling to see if it had completed yet. Okay, so we have these two functions that I haven't set up yet. I just showed you how the process is going to work. So we'll start with the function to get YouTube comments. And for that, because I'm not doing anything special, I'll just copy and paste it in. Right, so the idea here is I'm calling the YouTube API to get the comments for a particular video ID, passing in my API key, and I'm using HTTPX to grab everything, and then I'm returning it. So let me just import HTTPX at the top and install it. So UV add HTTPX, and that should be enough for get comments. But the code for analyze comments or analyze comments AI, that's going to be a little bit different. So I'll write the code there. So analyze comments AI, it's going to take in comments, which will be a dictionary, and it's going to return a list of comments. So a model that I'll define. Here in models.py, I'll do class comments. I'm going to inherit the base model, and then it's going to have an ID on it. It's going to have a category on it. So these are the AI results, and then reasoning will be a string, okay? So if we go back here, we can import that comments. Let's do analyze comment just to make it a little more clear. So analyze comment here, and then this will return a list of analyzed comments. So now we want to do the actual AI stuff. So I'm going to use Pydantic AI. So UV add Pydantic AI. So let me go ahead and install that. And I'll go to the top and import agent from Pydantic AI. That's all I need from Pydantic AI. So from Pydantic_AI, import agent. And then I want to set that agent up here. So I'll do agent equals and then agent. And then the AI model that I want to use is OpenAI O3 Mini. So because I'm using OpenAI, I don't have to pass in my API key here. It's going to load it from the environment. And then the system prompt for this will be a prompt that I'll set up. So I'll call this comments analysis prompt. And then the output type is simply going to be a list of these analyzed comments. So list of analyzed comments here. So let's go ahead and create this prompt. So let's create a file called prompts.py. And this is going to be comment analysis prompt as a constant. And I've already written the prompts. So let me just put the quotes here. And it's a really basic prompt. Of course, this can be improved. But the idea here is it's telling it that it's a YouTube comment classifier. And with the input, classify each comment as one of the following categories. And like I said, the categories are dynamic, so you can change these if you want. So I just put some here on like what I've seen from comments. So it's going to figure out how each comment matches each category and pick the best one. And then it's going to return the ID, it's going to return the category, and then some reasoning. And we're not going to use the reasoning, but I just like to put that there for debugging purposes. So that's what the prompt looks like. And I think I need to put this on this line. Okay, so the comments analysis prompt, and then in main.py, what I can do is I can import that. So from prompts, import comments analysis prompt. And then I'll go down to the bottom here, and yeah, it's already there. Okay, so that's setting up the agent. So now I need to prepare the data to send it. So I have the comments as an argument, and I need to format them in a particular way. So I'll create a variable called formatted comments, and then I'll just basically build this, right? So it's going to start off with an XML comments tag, and then I'll just do a new line. And then I'll say for comment ID and comment text in comments.items, right? So this is just coming from the YouTube stuff above. What I want to do is I want to add these onto the formatted comments. So we'll say comments as an individual comment. It's going to have an ID. So it's going to be comment ID for the ID. So I can close the ID tag. Then it's going to have a text tag, and then comment text. Then I can close the text tag, and then I can close the comment tag, just like that. And then after the loop, I can update formatted comments to have the closing comments tag. So closing comments here. And then what I can do is I can add a new line here. The new lines don't matter. It's just if I have to look at this, it'd be a little bit easier to read. And I can put a new line after the closing comment there. So once I have that, and then I can do results equals. So now I want to run the agent. So call the LLM by doing agent.run_sync. And then I want to pass in the formatted comments there. And then I just want to return the result.output, right? So that should be enough for the AI process. So let's see this work. Let's add some prints to make sure everything looks okay. So here I'll say set task ID. And then here we have retrieved YouTube comments. And then we have analyzed comments, right? So now we want to say process complete down here. Okay, so let me set everything up. Let's go to .env, and I'll add the YouTube API key. I think that's what I called it. Yeah, YouTube API key, and I'll add that in a second. And also the OpenAI API key, which I'll also add in a second. Okay, and then for settings, we have YouTube API key here, which will be a string, and then OpenAI API key, which is also a string, and I've already added those actual values to the env. So I believe this is enough to test, and if something goes wrong, I'll just print out the extra information here. So let's try it. Let's say, let's do UV run FastAPI dev, and do we get any errors? Yes, so we have an error here on line 59. The error is I just forgot a curly bracket for the dictionary. So you have to put a dictionary here for a JSON.dump s, and then I can remove that. And I need a double quote there. So let's try it again. And now, same line, I'm missing a closing paren. Okay, so fix that. And now it looks like it's running. So now let's try to analyze this video. So let's go hit execute here, and we get a task ID. And let's see if there were any errors. So the error that I'm getting is the connection was refused. So that's basically saying that my Docker isn't running. I thought I had it running. So I started it, and now let's try it again. And let's go over and hit execute again, and let's see. Okay, so it says set task ID, and then we see retrieved YouTube comments. And I'm just going to wait for analyze comments. So remember, this is going to take a while because it's calling the LLM and it's sending the comments over. So this will take a few seconds, but if it works and nothing is too wrong with it, then we'll see the print. So analyze comments and then process complete. So we see it was able to run through the process successfully. We're not looking at the output data yet, but at least we get a sense that it was able to go through the process without crashing. So now we need to create that second endpoint. And this second endpoint is going to be a lot easier than what we just did. And for that second endpoint, all we need to do is we need to get the status. So I'll just put it above here, and I'll call this /status. And it's going to take in a task ID. Right. So the name of this will be get task status, and it's going to take in a task ID as a string, and it's going to return a model called task status. So let's go ahead and create task status in models. So down here under analyze comments, we'll say task status. It's going to inherit from base model, and then the task ID will be a string. The status will be a string, and the data will be a dictionary. Okay, so if we go back to main.py, we can go to the get task status. And all we need to do here is we need to get the data from Redis. So I'll just call this response, and I'll use the R object with .get, and I'll pass in the task ID. So this task ID will match the task ID I called when I did r.set here. And this will return JSON. So I need to call json.loads. So it will be converted to a dictionary. And then all I want to do is just return all that. So I'll return task status. I want to return task ID equals task ID. I want to return status equals response status. And then for the data, I want to return response.get data. And if the data doesn't exist, just add an empty dictionary. Right? So now we have this task status, and we see task status is not defined. That's because I forgot to import it. So task status up here. And now it looks okay. So let's go over. Let's grab this task ID because we know this already ran. Let's refresh the page here. And let's try calling it with the task ID. So I passed in the task ID there, hit execute, and let's see. So it looks like it works. So we have the response output. So we see the task ID. We see the status is completed. We see the feedback. So this is a chess video. So on this video, there's feedback. So things are chess related here. And then after the feedback key, we have questions where people ask questions. We have thanks, advice, tips, and video suggestions. So it looks like the backend API is working just fine. So now let me try running the front end. So the front end code is already running and it's going to call the backend. So because the backend is working, the front end should work just fine. So let me paste in the URL, hit analyze. So it's saying analyzing, and it's going to take a moment, and then it's going to analyze the comments and then display them here if everything works correctly, which it appears that it is. Okay, and now the results have popped up and we see the same thing. We see feedback here. We see the comments associated with feedback, and then questions, thanks, advice, tips, and video suggestions. So we see everything works. my FastAPI backend is working correctly. Let me go ahead and remove the prints, and that's it. So this is one part of the series that I'm doing. The next part in the series is I'm going to focus on creating the front end from scratch. Just like I created the back end from scratch, I'll create the front end from scratch in the next video. So in the front end video, the back end will already be complete. It's going to be exactly what we did here. And then what's going to happen is I'll create the front end from scratch and you'll see how I set up everything there. It's a React app. It uses TanStack. So if you're interested in learning the front end part of this, you can check out this video, which I'll link to once the video is actually available. If you're watching this video right away after I release it, then you just have to wait a while before I release that front end video, but it will be coming.